Welcome to the Directing Animation Livecast with Scott Weiser. In my many years as an animator and director, my most defining projects have been my short film, Layers, along with Vanishing Ink and Cirque de Solitude, two books which I wrote, illustrated, and pitched at several studios as feature films. And I have more of these feature film pitches coming soon. Today, we are with the wonderful William Joyce. He is one of the biggest inspirations for my career, and I am so excited to be able to interview him today. If you don't know William's work, you actually do know William's work. He has been a children's book author for many years. He was instrumental in the early days of Pixar with Toy Story and Bug's Life. He created the series Roly Poly Oly. The book behind Meet the Robinsons was written by him, and he was key in the development of that film. And he created Moonbot Studios, which was my dream job for many years. And right now he's just continuing on. He's just continued to create wherever he can and tell great stories. Is there anything you'd like me to add, Bill?
Let's see. That I won the second place in the science fair in the 4th grade.
That is an important achievement. Yes, he also won the Oscar for the Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Moore's Lessmore. That was pretty exciting.
But the science fair win was huge.
It was huge. What was your project?
I electrically trained worms.
Allegedly.
It really didn't work, and it was a thing I saw in some stupid book about science fair project. It sounded cool, and I got to have a pile of worms that we shocked with a 12-volt battery from time to
time. That's awesome. So what are you working on now? Does it have anything to do with worms?
It does not. And I've actually tried for years to figure out a way to sneak that into something, but it hasn't happened yet. Now, as of today, I started a new short film with my new company called Howdy Bot. And we raised the money, and we have extraordinary partners, and we start today.
Wow. And can you tell me a bit about the process of getting the right partners, raising the money, that sort of thing?
What
are all your secrets?
God, oh my gosh. In raising the money for Moonbot, it was really just going to people I knew in Shreveport, in my hometown, and then it became one particular fella who backed us.
Yeah,
and was incredibly hands-off and very kind and thoughtful.
Yeah,
and wished us well and wanted something not just for us but for the community. And because I've lived most of my life in my hometown. Traveled to work on all these movies all this time, but always kept the base here, raised my kids here, and I don't know, maybe I watched too many Frank Capra movies when I was growing up, but has significance for me. And so he was like, I want to do something for the town and for you. And the whole point of Moonbot, a lot of it was to see if we could do world-class animation in the 104th smallest town in the United States, and where animation had never been done before, and because we knew no one would hire us to do something unless we proved we could put together a great team. So that fella believed in that idea, and we dreamt of what would happen. We dared to dream that we might get someplace significant, but we did better than we expected. And so getting nominated for the Oscar, then winning the Oscar, and then putting together the first, the app that was based on the short film, and that succeeding, we were much heralded, within months of opening, and with a crew that was 90% recent graduates from Ringling School of Design.
Yeah.
And so it was like, literally, it was like an old Mickey Rooney movie where we put on a show in the barn, right? And we went to Broadway, and it was a hit. And,
yeah.
And we didn't really know that much about what we were doing. It was a wing and a prayer almost the entire time. But we were going on our instincts. And for one of those rare times in one's life and career, those instincts bore out, and paid out. And we did what we were hoping desperately to do.
Yeah. Well, and after listening to that, I don't think you can watch too many Frank Capra movies. He's amazing.
God, there's a little extra. There's a button to that story even. That's when we came back from Los Angeles. There were people at the airport with waiting for us, like in old movies.
Yeah.
Welcome home. Congratulations. Signs everywhere, all over town. My favorite was on the oldest liquor store in town. Had congratulations, Bill. Even liquor. But then, to make it even cooler and more Capra-esque, they had a ticker tape parade in downtown Shreveport for us and for Moonbot, and most of the buildings are 90% of the buildings on the parade route are 3 stories tall, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard to do ticker tape from that low. And it was the first ticker tape parade in downtown Shreveport since the end of World War II. Okay. And so they put up, they rented 100 of these confetti cannons that I didn't know such a thing existed, but they do, which you can just load up with, confetti forever and just keep shooting confetti in the air. And so, we made the route, and the whole town came out, and there were marching bands, and we had our own Mardi Gras float because we're in Louisiana, so of course we have our own Mardi Gras float. But we had this awesome Moonbot Mardi Gras float that we all rode in the parade, and then when we stopped at the sort of at this place at the end of the route, the mayor gave us the keys to the city and proclaimed it Moonbot Day, and then everyone in town sang "For They're a Jolly Good Fellow."
Wow.
And we were in our Moonbot jumpsuits that had been made by Dickies of Fort Worth, the same people who made our shows. And I turned to Brandon and I was like, man, it's like, I feel like we're at the end of It's a Wonderful Life. And somebody just said, here's George Bailey, the richest man in town to me. And a bell just rang and we got our wings,
Yeah. I was going to make a joke about that, but you beat me to it. Yeah. That's one of my favorite movies. And Shreveport just sounds like such a special place.
It is, and it doesn't realize it. And so I like celebrating it and helping it understand how cool it is.
Well, I wish I could have joined you guys there. We talked about this beforehand, but things didn't align quite right for me to join you guys there at Moonbot. Oh, actually, I did translate the Lollipop Eggs of Doom app into Portuguese.
Oh my God. And because you speak Portuguese?
I do speak Portuguese.
You do?
Yeah.
That's amazing. No one speaks. But why do you speak Portuguese? Are you Portuguese? What? Tell me more.
Oh, I just spent about 2 years down there in the Amazon rainforest and serving the people, and getting to know them, and yeah.
Awesome. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Portuguese is a beautiful language.
It is so beautiful.
My best friend spoke Portuguese as well, and he went down to South America and did kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
But that's yes. So which one did you translate again? The Lollipops of Doom?
The Lollipop 3 Eggs of Doom, as I think what it was called.
That was one of my favorite things that we did.
Really?
Colossal failure. we lost so much money on that, and but it was the most delirious thing. It just wasn't. We didn't know how to like share it in a way that would make money.
Yeah.
So, great fun as an experience, as a business move, dreadful. And,
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, I just forgot the name of the app, but there was a pig. You threw away pigs, like
yes,
Angry Pigs or something like that.
I don't remember. There was so much stuff. I was like, I want this game to be like an almost epileptic sugar high. And
That's what it felt like.
just put more. Then, oops, are we back?
We're back.
Okay, just put more stuff that anybody can even begin to like take in. I mean, just make it just, and so that you're laughing with the absurdity of how fast and furious and ridiculous things are happening.
Yeah.
And so there.
Well, the crazy thing to me was when it showed up as an IMDb credit. I don't know if it's because there was a short attached to it or what, but I got an IMDb credit for translating it into Portuguese.
I need to put that on mine too.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's an important credit.
Proudest achievements. And
that is almost as important as the worms.
Say what?
In the science fair.
It literally, I can't even explain how. It was one of those moments when I tapped into my 5-year-old brain or something. I don't know. And just started thinking up the goofiest stuff I could, and how to weave a very serious sounding mythological backstory for 3 tiny animals having to save the universe with lollipops of eternal joy.
Against eggs of doom. Yeah, that's awesome.
Eggs of doom, yes, that were laying by the meanie men.
It's kind of like that quote from Picasso, and I'm going to butcher it, but he said something to the effect of, "It took me a couple years to learn to draw and a lifetime to learn how to draw like a child."
There's so much truth in that.
Yeah.
Simplicity is the hardest thing to achieve.
Yeah, it is.
It is in many ways the core of almost everything that we do. It's hard to realize that with how complicated the process is and the medium.
Yeah.
Movies are simple. And
they are.
Most novels and most stories and most art is a simple idea that you sort of catch, like that. And kids understand it. My favorite thing to do still is, or one of my favorite things to do, is to just line up some kids in a row and have them say a line of a story.
Oh yeah, that's fun.
Okay, there once was a frog that could fly, and just see where each one takes it. And it's like Axe Cop or something. They're fearless. Their narrative fearlessness is and their need to embrace absurdity is very inspiring.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and I had a thought and I just lost it. we'll just move on. Yeah, it was something about being childlike. It was really cool. Something you said, but I lost it. So yeah, and it's interesting that we did talk a little bit about before the show of how you have sometimes the Mr. Potters in your life, and sometimes you have the George Baileys in your life. Yeah. And as you're talking about how stories are so simple, I think sometimes if you do your job right and you make it really simple, even then you'll have people trying to push it to be more complex.
Yes. I mean, animation is one of the most expensive things you can do.
Right.
And if you're a painter, you can sit down and without much expense, sit down and do a drawing on a rock or a piece of paper or some canvas. if you're a writer, with your word processor. Oh my God, what am I saying? It's like Joe Biden all of a sudden. Like it's you just write it down on something.
Yeah.
And, in dance it's more complicated. But you can simply dance.
You can.
Theater it's more complicated, but you can sit down and just do theater, and with chairs and a stage and nothing else. But animation, filmmaking, and most particularly animation, requires so much time. And time, it really is money. And so,
Yeah, it really is.
and doing what we do is very expensive. And the people who have the money to let you do that are sometimes trusting in your abilities, and sometimes they are worried about
Yeah.
your. And that's a legitimate concern. It's their money.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure that it's going to be spent well, and that they'll make their money back.
Yeah.
And,
with interest.
yeah. Otherwise, they put it in, something that would guarantee more. It certainly put it in something that would guarantee you wouldn't lose money.
Yeah.
But so in animation, you're always fighting that uneasy mix of commerce and art.
Yes.
And so my experiences in film and animation, have been all over the map. I was describing it to you earlier, as like you made it in George Bailey's and Mr. Potter's. And, I've been lucky in encountering a lot of kind and trusting people who let me do what I do best, which is make up worlds and compelling ideas and stories. And I've met people who wanted to trust that, but by the very nature of the expense, when you're spending 150 or 175 or $200 million on a movie, those guys are going to have concerns.
Yes.
And sometimes those concerns don't line up with what you're trying to, the story you're trying to tell.
You're right.
And when that happens, then it's difficult. And you have to tread lightly or heavily, however you want to tread, but you're going to have to tread.
Yes.
And you're not going to be skipping through that field of creativity. You're going to be treading along, hoping you don't hit a landmine or get shot. And that makes it more difficult. Now, sometimes when you've got the right people that are concerned about the expense, but they're on the same creative page, or they believe in what you're trying to do enough, they trust that you're going to find your way, and they don't make, suggestions that diminish it. And so, like on Toy Story, there was a lot of freedom, but there's also a lot of intense and eventually profoundly good input. But there also was this feeling of like, oh my God, we're getting away with murder. Once there was this sort of, we got past some of the hardest story stuff, then it was just golden. And then right after doing that, I started developing the series Roly Poly Oly for the Disney Channel, and it was a theater company out of Canada called Nelvana, and the head of that studio, a man named Toker Taylor, he just believed in what I wanted to do completely and utterly. He's like, let him do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And so, I'm like, I wanted to do the sweetest show, not like saccharine sweet, just like gentle and not ironic and not cynical. And I was like, robots, it's like Leave It to Beaver with robots. There's like blue skies and picket fences, and everybody's a robot, and everything's alive. And there are many influences like Pee-wee's Playhouse and things like that just this joyful sense in the Fleischer cartoons of the 30s, some of the early Disney stuff. And I said, I want the music to be like old Little Rascals music, and so they literally they put together a band of musicians and totally recreated that sound of what's the fellow's name? Leroy Shields, I think is his name, who did the music for the Little Rascals and all the Laurel and Hardy films.
Okay.
And, I mean, they totally got it, and then we hired a guy to write the theme song, and he kept doing these kind of Broadway kind of sounding things, these big like showstopper things. I'm like, no, it's got to be this simple ditty, like kind of and so I said, look, let me just see if I can write this. And so I wrote the theme song, and they were like, okay, terrific. And and then Disney went, okay, we love it. It tested incredibly well, and they were just like, so let them do what they do. And we would have meetings once a year. We had 6 seasons. We'd have a meeting with our execs at Disney once a year to kind of plan out the next year's, what they would like to see happen within the world we created. And it was all so, I'm not going to say vague. They just said, it'd be nice if there was somebody who was, if we could tackle or address racial issues or in a subtle way, and or a handicapped robot in a subtle way. And we're like, awesome, and then we would go do it, and then other than that, it was pretty much then the shows would just air, and it was so that all those people at that time came together to just trust that we would figure it out, and then we would come up with something that people like, and they did. It was a rating hit. We won 6 Emmys. I mean, it was really joyful, and that kind of freedom is rare, and it's intoxicating. And once you taste that, and 6 years is a long time, and I was doing other stuff. That's what I was doing. Robots. I was doing, and then from robots, we started on Leafman, which became epic, the worst title ever. And
I didn't mention that one. I didn't mention robots. Lots of work.
Lots. But having that freedom then, and having it go for so long, really kind of ruined me. And so everything after that, was a mixed bag. And I'm very proud of every one of the projects, but each one had some concessions to the people who worry about money.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, and I'll be honest with you, and I'm not trying to float my own boat here, but I found that when people just trust in the vision, that it always succeeded more than when they questioned it or tried to shoehorn it into something that they thought would succeed.
Well, and you've said that word several times, trust, right? I think perhaps it isn't even floating your own boat, which I'm fine with your boat floating. It's a great boat. But maybe it's the process of trust that is so important.
Well, and it takes a great deal of courage. And so I'm for the most part, I'm not criticizing the fellows at the motion picture studios or the television studios for their involvement. Their jobs are on the line.
Right.
Not just that they're making sure that the money's well spent, that, it takes an extraordinary amount of guts for, and this is what I tell people now, and it came to me one day, I don't know why it took this long recently, but I was like, you have to tell a story that makes somebody want to spend $200 million. It's as simple as that.
Right.
They have to like it a lot to go, I'm going to spend $200 million and several years and put my career as an executive on the line for approving this.
Yeah.
And so that those guys, those people, those men and women, they operate under a great deal of stress and in having made that decision. Some of them have more clarity about how to make that happen than others. But you have to cut them a lot of slack because they have put their careers and their asses on the line for your story.
That's a great perspective. It's something that I hadn't thought. As I've been listening to you, I've been thinking that is extremely valuable. I have to completely immerse my brain in that because it is important. And the question that arises from that is, how do you come up with a film that people are willing to put that much on the line?
You know, it's an alchemy that one will never be able to explain.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen. You know, I think I've done 5 feature films, and that were my idea.
Right.
And so 5 times I had an idea that was good enough.
5 times.
That's, you know how many ideas I get?
Oh, yeah. I think we're very similar in that way. We were talking before the show about how you could spend all day drawing and story is harder, where I like to sit, because of my musical theater background and all the shows and things I wrote as a child, and I'd make my neighborhood kids do plays too. But because of that, like, drawing is a little harder for me. So I have to start with a story. I have to really get into that first and then move into writing. And yeah. But I think the amount of ideas that come are probably very similar.
You know, and you kind of know in your gut, like, oh, wait a minute.
That's a good one.
This one's good.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, when we pitched, Wilbur Robinson was the first movie pitch I ever did, and they're making a film not far from Shreveport. Disney was a live action film, and I met the producer, and he was like, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "I do these children's books." But I went to film school, and he said, "Well, let me see your stuff." And so I showed him Wilbur Robinson. It wasn't even published yet. It was just sort of the pre-published. They call it F&Gs, which stands for Folded and Gathered. And yes, that's the revised version when the movie came out, because they let me add some stuff that I wanted.
Oh yeah, it even has the bubble on it that says based on Meet the Robinsons. Yeah.
And he goes, "This is cool. I think we could sell this as a movie." I'm like, "Oh, beautiful words. Yeah." He goes, "All right, just give me a couple of days, and let me see if I can set up a meeting." And I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so he said, "Okay, we have a meeting with the head of development at Touchstone, which is a division of Disney, and you're going to pitch the story to her." And I'm like, "Well, you know, this is a picture book. There's like not a lot of story." He goes, "We'll make one up by tomorrow." At 2:30, Central Standard Time. And so I sat there all night thinking of this thing, and we got on the phone, and I'm like, I'm so nervous, and so everybody picks up, and it's like, "This is so and 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 so from Disney," and I'm like, "Nice to meet you guys," and they're like, "Hello, and then they're like, "Go ahead, just tell us your story. We have the images here from your book. This is beautiful." And I'm like, "Okay, great, that's awesome." And so I talked, I guess, for 20 minutes, and they didn't make a sound. There wasn't a question, there wasn't a laugh, there was just crickets, and then I was done, and there's this quiet, this really, like, I don't know, maybe 5-10 seconds, but it felt forever quiet. And And I was like, God, that's the most humiliating thing. And they go, well, okay, gee, okay, Bill, thank you very much, and it was very nice talking to you, and there you go.
Oh,
And they hung up,
oh,
and my wife goes, how'd it go? I go, it was horrible.
it was the worst thing ever.
It was the most humiliating thing that's ever happened to me. Oh my God, they didn't make a sound. They're like zombies. They're like dead people.
Yeah.
And then the phone rang, and it was the producer, and he goes, okay, they want to do it.
Wow. Wow.
And they said, do you want to write it? And I go, yeah. They go, okay.
Now, at that point, did you have the keep moving forward idea in there, the Disney quote?
No.
Or
No.
wow. Because that's kind of the core of it, right?
Okay, yes. And what you have to understand is it was going to be, at that point, it was going to be live action.
Oh,
and,
yeah. Makes sense.
And for quite a number of years, it was going to be live action. And so then everybody kept getting fired. And that's one of the things. I mean, movies take so long sometimes to make that the heads of the studio, when you start, may not be the heads of the studio for that much longer. And so I went through 5 regime changes on the course of
wow.
on Wilbur, and I made other movies like in that period of time. I did Roly Poly. Roly Poly only started after that initial call.
And Robots, probably.
Toy Story, I worked on Bugs Life, and then I initiated and art directed and produced Robots in that period of time, and began work on Leafman, which became Epic, and did a whole other television series called George Shrinks, all in the period of time, and started on Rise of the Guardians.
Right. The books or the film?
The books, but always with the eye towards the film.
Right.
And all while Meet the Robinsons came and went. I got fired off of it 8 times or 11 times. I can't remember. And I wrote, I think, 8 drafts of the screenplay.
Yeah.
And I finally, and this is one of those times, oh my gosh, there was a real devil, a real Mr. Potter, who was in charge of things for a while. And that man he was everything you try to keep away from in the movies. And I got really upset with him one day, and I called him. I'm not going to tell you what I called him, but I had to wait for him to get fired before I got rehired to work on Wilbur again, and so it changed many, many times. And the keep moving forward came from the director, and it changed a lot of the focus of the film to story of adoption, and the director had been adopted, and so that was a story he wanted to tell.
Important to
I
him,
found that it dovetailed very nicely in the sort of world that the Robinsons presented. And in my versions of the story, it was always about a kid who didn't quite fit in anywhere, and then by befriending Wilbur Robinson, found a way to fit in. And they are also affable, and they are so different. And so essentially it was the same story, just gave it the twist of having adoption. I thought that worked really nicely. But that's kind of the thing, like in developing these motion pictures, sometimes it adheres very, very closely to your original conception, but there's a million ways to skin a cat. That's one of the things you have to realize about any story, is that sometimes you find this perfect route, this perfect narrative route, and you find it instinctually, And I think that Morris Lessmore was a good example. But even that had like, gosh, it's impossible. That story changed also many times. It's there's room for change in almost every story, and sometimes it enriches it in ways you never could have anticipated. And when we were working on The Rise of the Guardians, I had initially seen Jack Frost as a sort of Rip Van Winkle character. He was an adult, and he had been buried in an avalanche and had been frozen for 100 years. When he finally got out of the ice, he was frozen and forever frozen. But everybody he knew had died. His family was gone, and so he was a very lonely character, an outsider. And that the initial discussions on the film, because I said I don't want the film, and Jeffrey Katzenberg agreed with this, and it's one reason why we got along so well, is I want the film to be about what happens after the books. The books set up their mythology, but the film should be what happens after that. And he goes, that's cool. He goes, but you need one character to bring the audience in, to identify with. And we talked about the Magnificent Seven, because in a way we had some of the same thing going on. The Guardians were established: Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, the Sandman. Those guys were they're already who they were. They'd been that way for a while. But Jack Frost was not. But we had to pick one. Who would be it? And I go, the least defined is Jack Frost. And he goes, all right, that's who you need to focus on. And because that's what the Magnificent Seven, a lot of it is about, is one guy who is not like the other gunfighters. And so he is not yet a gunfighter. He is not yet a magnificent, nor one of the seven. And makes the seventh. And so it was hard to make Jack Frost's story fit in with what I had come up with. So they sit me down. This is one of those times when the executives make a generous choice. And instead of telling me what to do, they said, we want you to meet with all the heads of story that we have and all our best story people. We're going to put you in a room for a day. And let's just listen to them and talk to them. And I was like, God, it just sounds like making a movie by committee. I mean, I'm kind of nervous about that. And they're like, don't be. It's not like that. Just these guys have been doing story forever. You've been doing story for a very long time. It's good to bounce things off of people who are good. And these people are good, and they wish you well. They love this project. And I'm like, okay. And it was magnificent. One of the story guys said, out of nowhere, said, what if Jack Frost is a kid? And that was contrary to everything I'd been thinking about this project for 10 years. I mean, it completely dismantled what I had been seeing in my head for all that time. But that idea, it was like, for me, it was like the biggest diamond in the rough. I mean, it was a diamond in the middle of coal. I mean, it was just sharp. And my mind went bananas in that instant. And I'm like, yeah, like Peter Pan. I mean, being stuck as a kid forever sounds awesome, but it really was complicated. And in Peter Pan, I mean, a lot of times they downplay that, but Peter it wasn't a perfect existence at all. It was somewhat tragic. Peter's friends all grew up. He had to say goodbye to every friend he had. Yeah. And he was able to go back and see Wendy, but Wendy as an adult, and then Wendy's kids. And then that was what kept him going. But there was a loneliness there, and it's in the book much more than it is in any of the films that Peter experienced. And I thought, God, that's beautiful. We can bring in that powerful mythology of the kid that never grows up, but how that is not maybe the greatest thing, that it's lonely. Yeah. And he needs a family, and the family is the Guardians. Right. So it's about them becoming a family. And then so many things fell into place after that. But it took that skill of Jeffrey and Bill Damasky and the guys at DreamWorks, and then all those story guys, and the trust of sitting around and coming up with something that would be cool. And then the most valuable thing I think you can have in this business is be willing to change. That your stuff isn't always gold the first day out.
Yeah.
And some stuff that you have that you love so much may be getting in your way, and be open to the possibility of a magnificent idea that may change so much, but it will make it so much better.
Yeah, completely agree with that. That's a golden piece of advice as well. I told this story on the last episode because we had an animator. He now has his own studio, but he was an animator on Rise of the Guardians. And I think it'd be valuable for you to hear. I'd broken into the animation industry, but then following that, I had this it was actually 18 months of unemployment. And I think it was near the end of that I was just feeling completely defeated. I thought, maybe animation isn't for me. And I went and saw Rise of the Guardians, and it completely restoked the flame. The fire was just blazing after I came out of that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of that film.
You should be. You should be. I was very happy to see that it did even better when it was on DVD.
It should have succeeded so much more than it did. And I'm not going to sit down and tell you the horror of that, but it still stands, its test of time.
Yeah, it does.
And Jeffrey told me at the beginning of this, when we were making the deal, I was hesitant. And Jeffrey Katzenberg doesn't have to try to make me happy.
Yeah.
But he loved that idea. And I'm like, Jeffrey, I don't want the Guardians to become jokes. It's too important to me. A lot of the reason I did this story is to give the mythology of these characters real power, because they're kind of, there wasn't a lot of definition for some of them, and I felt like some of them were beginning to sort of fade away, especially Jack Frost. Kids just weren't talking about Jack Frost. Mm-hmm. And I know this through my own kids, and I said, so I don't want them to become like these joke machines, okay? I love the movies that you guys do, but this one's going to be should be a little different, and I want kids to believe in these guys. Mm-hmm. They have to be believable. They cannot be totally comic, diminished characters. It's about building them up.
Yeah.
And he goes, Bill, I promise you, you won't be disappointed in what we come up with, what you help us come up with. And,
right.
And he was true to his word, and sometimes against his instincts, or against what he wanted to fall back on. Mm-hmm. He would on occasion say, look, we need some more jokes, and then we would say, no, we got to keep, the jokes just have to be good. It isn't more. They have to be good. You can't break the character, the spell. And he would say, okay. And that was tough. He was looking out for his money. And he knew what would sell. Yeah. And it's but sometimes, we kept talking about Star Wars. Star Wars is a funny movie, but it's not a comedy.
No,
and
it's not.
You believe in what's happening. You believe the stakes. And so it was a brave thing for them to do.
It was brave. Wow. So we're almost over here. The last question I usually ask is the get wiser moment. And a little cheesy. So it used to be phrased as, what responsibility does a filmmaker have to the world culture? But I was always getting some answer that said, tell the truth. It's got to be truthful. It's got to be truth in there. So my question is now, if my goal is to get the highest purity and concentration of truth into a story, what approach would you suggest?
All right, you're going to have to say that again.
Yeah, it's evolved too far. Yeah, everybody asked me to repeat it twice.
It's simple.
If my goal is to get the highest concentration of truth into a story, what approach would you suggest?
It's just your instincts.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a smart person, if you're not a fool, and but making films is a very foolish endeavor. There's much easier ways to make a living, and there's a lot of ways to stay more sane. And I mean, when something sucks,
Yeah.
And when you come up with something that sucks.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's really hard to admit it. And sometimes you go, it's just good enough. Yeah, this piece is soft, but nobody's going to notice. I mean, you fool yourself.
You do.
And so it's hard sometimes to hear someone go, I like it, but this part's. I mean, they're not saying it sucks, but you get all this like verbiage. This sucks.
Yeah. There's some hints there for sure.
It gets defensive. You're like, well, it's because I had to. I mean, the character needs, and you have to face the fact that it sucked. It's not good enough. And so you have to. Yeah. If you're asking about truth, I guess that is knowing when you truly suck.
Well, and if there's any theme to this episode as I've listened to you, it would be the word trust, I believe. And you talked about trusting your instincts and also trusting what you hear from people, trusting their feedback. Have people around who you trust, who can help you know how to get over those pieces that are too soft or that suck, and how to refine.
The last piece of, if not advice, just what I do.
Okay.
Whenever I'm working on a story, the most helpful thing I found is to tell it to everybody I can talk to. Everybody that I like, or some people I don't even like. I mean, just telling it.
Yep.
And sometimes you get an instinctual read just from seeing their faces. You get an energy feel from it, but you also can feel in your heart when you're telling it, this part sounds weak.
Yeah.
So don't sequester yourself and hold it all so dear. Go out and from day one, tell people the story, because you'll start building. You'll start instinctually knowing when something sucks, and then you'll add shit out of nowhere, that your instincts will just pluck out of your brain. And you go, oh, that was pretty good. And always record yourself when you're doing this, because you'll forget. Sometimes you'll forget the stuff you added, the way you told it different that made it better. But just don't be so precious about it. Go around and tell people. Say it out loud.
Yeah.
It helps.
Well, that is brilliant advice. Thank you.
It's just simple shit.
Well, and we actually had Kevin Lee also said something very, very similar, and it so far has proved to be very rewarding. I liked the added idea, the added on top of his, of recording yourself, because you might forget what made it better, and that is just we'll be doing that.
There's so many times when Brandon and I, or Joe Bloom and I mean, it's like, record it.
Don't forget. Yeah. Well, we have to end now, and it's been a wonderful interview. And if anybody wants to follow William Joyce, you can find him as Hey Bill Joyce on both Instagram and Twitter. And you'll see wonderful, inspiring things going on there. And tune in next time for our next guest, who is Denver Jackson. He's animated 2 feature films on his own. So it'll be a very interesting and insightful interview as well. So until next time, enjoy. You have been watching the Directing Animation Livecast with Scott Weiser. Audio version edited by Kiera Horowitz. Copyright Scott Weiser LLC 2020.